There's something within us so cherished and rare and sacred and precious and powerful that there are forces, organizations, power structures that will go to any length to deny us that power. And the question is, do we love ourselves enough to accept the responsibility and the deep truth of what it means to be human? Do we love ourselves enough?
Hi guys, welcome to Easy A. I'm your host Alexis Wren, and
I'm Allie Michelle.
This guest was one of the most important guests that I've ever wanted to have on my podcast. It was one of the main reasons that I wanted to have a podcast, so I had an excuse to talk to someone like him. And we actually scheduled this podcast a year in advance because I was like, this has to happen. And we are so grateful and so lucky to have Gregg Braden on with us today. You guys, his research, his studies for the last, I think I found him about 5 or 6 years ago, have absolutely transformed my life in so many ways. And I'm so excited for you guys to hear everything that he's up to. And yeah, I have a feeling this is going to be such a transformational conversation. So welcome, Gregg.
Wow, well, I just learned a whole lot.
Yeah.
I didn't know any of those things. So
Yeah.
I have followed your podcast. I enjoy your podcast. You have interviewed some of my dear friends, colleagues, spiritual brothers and sisters, and I'm honored to be with you today. I want to thank our audience, your community and my family for clicking the link that connects us. And let everybody know this is completely unscripted. We have absolutely no idea what we're going to say today. So I want to thank you for your trust in bringing me in with your community, because the truth is you don't know what I'm going to say.
We have no idea. And to be honest with you, I was homeschooled. My mother chose a different background for me. And so growing up, I always felt a little insecure about my upbringing because I wasn't taught such traditional history. But when I found you restored my curiosity and my love and the fascination of what our past has. So just another compliment, like it really transformed my relationship with learning.
See, what you don't know is I really don't get out much. I mean, we do the conferences, I do media and interviews, and I don't know often how this work lands. I don't know how it falls. And in the world around us, I'll tell you something crazy. We just did some calculations. This is the 47th year I've done this work.
Wow.
In one form or another. And I don't know where 47 years just went. We've covered a lot of ground in those 47 years. And if something I have said has inspired you at some point in your life in a good way. So you said it changed your life. That could go either way. We want to change it in a good way. Then we did our work well together. And thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that with me.
Yeah, no, it means so much. And also the way that you teach, I think we're in a very volatile state right now in the world. And it can get paralyzing, kind of, at least for me and Allie. We've grown up together. It's been, paralyzing sometimes. But the way that you teach and your positive outlook on our future and also our past has really kept me going, and also us together to kind of keep building a positive outlook as opposed to a more fear-based outlook.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's a lot of good reasons to be positive. So we've never done this. Allie, may I call you Allie? Are you okay if I call you that? And Alexis, I'll just call you Alexis as well?
Yes.
Yeah, well, we're just getting started, and I want to honor you for the time that we're together here. So thank you. I'll never have to ask you that question again. No, I think there's a lot of reasons to be positive. We often don't see that. And I think where that comes from is when you take a look at the big picture of what's happening in the world. I think for most of your viewers, most of my community, my family, it's obvious that this isn't business as usual. There's something happening that is not typical. And if we don't have a sense, I'm not saying we have to understand every piece of it, but if we don't have a sense of what's happening, it can be frightening because it looks like the world's spiraling out of control for no apparent reason. And it's not the case. There is a structure. to what is unfolding. And there is a beginning, there's an end, there's a purpose. And I think what's important is we're in it. We have these conversations. We're not talking about something that's going to happen like 10 years down the line or some point in our distant future. We're in it. We're in the change of our lifetimes, and the only way out of it is to go through it. We have to go through what we're in. The question is, do we come through it with a soft landing, or do we have a rougher impact on the other side? And I think that's the hope that I have of sharing this kind of information with our community, is at least to help people to make healthy choices in their lives, not to tell anyone what to do. And as we go in this conversation, I want to be clear, it's not about making anyone else wrong. We don't want to make anyone wrong. There are facts that support the changes that are happening in the world and the choices that we make. And, there's a saying that knowledge is power. Lack of knowledge is lack of power. So the more we know, the better we know ourselves, the less fear we have about the change in the world. But I think most importantly, Ali, is the better we know ourselves, the less we fear our own personal power. Mm-hmm. And we are extremely powerful beings, although we are indoctrinated to believe that we are weak, flawed, and powerless. And because of that, we need something outside of us. We need something out there to be the best version of ourselves. And the best science of the modern world tells us that simply isn't true. Mm-hmm. So there is a lot of reason for hope. And I'll follow your lead and see where you'd like to go with this conversation.
Thank you so much. You've already just dropped so many beautiful lines. So we're excited to dive deeper. I think right now a lot of people are despairing with just everything being very oversaturated in AI, and it's like we've forgotten what makes us uniquely special as humans and what makes humanity precious. And I've heard you talk about our divinity being that thing, and I'd love if you could expand on how you define divinity.
Okay, so you started it first. You used the D word. I hadn't gone there yet, but you used it first. So
we go right there.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question right off the bat. How deep do you want to go with this?
As deep as possible, Gregg. All the way.
I was like, can we talk about the moon? What can we talk about? So many other things.
No. If honestly, to do justice to this conversation, there is a depth that we can go that a lot of people don't like to go, and I'm happy to do that. I want to do it in a way that's responsible, in a way that is kind, in a way that is uplifting. And to do that, we have to have conversations that sometimes aren't easy. And I'm asking your permission. It's your podcast. Are you okay if we have that conversation?
We would love it.
All right. So let's start with divinity. There a lot of people in my genre, my spiritual brothers and sisters, my colleagues, don't like to even use that word. And the reason is because it has a lot of baggage that comes along with it. Divinity in the past has been linked to religion, and I can certainly see why, because there are schools of divinity that make that connection. But here's where it gets really, really sweet. The contemporary definition, and you can look this up, of divinity simply means the ability to transcend perceived limitations, and that's it. So let's just unpack that a little bit. First of all, transcend means to become more than, not just to meet the challenges that life brings to our doorstep, but to become more than those challenges, the perceived limitations. I love this. Perceived limitations may not even be real. We may be confining ourselves and limiting ourselves to live in a way that we've been indoctrinated to accept, but it may not reflect. I'll just tell you right now, it does not reflect the truth of what the best science of the modern world is telling us about ourselves. So now that we're talking about divinity, what is divinity? Divinity is the part of us that is timeless, it is ageless. Divinity is where our imagination comes from. It's where our creativity comes from. It's where our innovation comes from. It's where our love begins. It's where our forgiveness begins. It's the reason that we have the ability to heal. When we heal, that is an expression of human divinity. So divinity plays a very, very powerful role. It is our lives. It is our world. The reason that I think it's important to have this conversation is because there's a concerted effort in our world right now to deny human divinity, to shield us, to veil us from our own power. And the way that is coming about is the movement to replace human biology with technology. It's called the transhuman movement. Trans means beyond, so human, beyond human movement. When we talk about transgender, it means beyond gender. We're going beyond those ideas. So the transhuman movement, it's not a new movement. What makes now so very different is that we, for the first time in human history, we have the technology that we've never had before to not only change the world around us, Alexis, but for the first time, we can actually change the world within us, and in my opinion, in ways that are not good for us. So there is a movement to replace human biology with technology, computer chips in the brain, for example, chemicals in the blood, RFID chips under the skin, nanosensors running through the circulatory system. And there are a lot of reasons for that, and we can talk about those reasons. But the transhuman movement, the goal of the transhuman movement is to replace our natural biology with synthetics, with artificial material that link us, that link us to a digital interface that is regulated through massive AI, massive artificial intelligence. So I just said a lot in those sentences. I want to break that down a little bit. The reason that anyone would want to deny our divinity is because it is our divinity that frees us from fear. It is our divinity that gives us the freedom to heal and to love and to forgive. When we express these deeply human attributes, we are much more difficult to control. And another way of saying it is when we give away those human attributes, we become much more vulnerable, much more susceptible to the ideas of other people, to the agendas of other people. And there are a lot of agendas out there. In our divinity is when we are in our power. Divinity is where our power on earth comes from. Again, our imagination, creativity, innovation, the ability to share ideas with other people. So I'm elaborating on this a little bit because I'm going to make a point here. When we deny human divinity, anything that denies human divinity is a form of evil. You know, and the word evil, we are now immersed in a very ancient, a very fundamental battle between some people call the forces of light and dark, or the forces of good and evil. And when I was a kid growing up, you know, we used to talk about good and evil, and it was kind of a joke. It was a metaphor. I was growing up in 1950s in the Midwest of this big, beautiful country of ours. I was born and raised in rural northern Missouri. And we always thought good and evil was like a little red devil that was on your shoulder. And they always looked the same. They had little red horns and little red pokey tail. And then there was an angel over here. And man, they were going back and forth, you know, saying, do this, don't do that. And that was the joke. Evil is real. And it is manifest in our world right now. I'm 70 years old. I've never seen in my 70 years what I'm seeing happening in the world right now. There are different kinds of evil. There's biological evil. There's technological evil. There's psychological evil. There's emotional evil. There's social engineering evil. So what is evil? I want to give us a benchmark that we can use to get a really solid handle on evil. And because you brought up the D word, divinity, I can do that now. We can very honestly, and this has nothing to do with religion, it has a lot to do with human existence. we can very honestly define evil as anything that denies our divinity, anything that denies our ability to imagine, to create, the freedom to share ideas, the freedom to love without fear, the freedom to forgive, the freedom to heal our own bodies, the freedom to know freedom, the freedom to know human sovereignty. These are all expressions of divinity. And we live at a time right now where there is a fundamental battle that is unfolding. It has throughout history, but it's coming to a focus now for a reason, and we can talk about that reason as well. But it's coming to a focus within the next few years of our lives, and you're going to see greater attempts, deeper expressions to deny human divinity, to make us more vulnerable to the agendas and the ideas of other people. The flip side of this is when we want to triumph over evil, we simply live our own divinity. When we talk about a battle between good and evil, this is what makes today so different. And this is what our most ancient and cherished history and spiritual traditions tell us. In the old days, when you think of a battle, you think of two forces fighting each other, force against force. We're beyond that. We've outgrown that. That's the old idea of a battle. This battle, we don't want to win. We want to triumph. And the way we triumph, the way good triumphs over evil, is that we live the best version of ourselves. We live the fullest expression of our divinity. We don't fight, don't necessarily, maybe we have to fight sometimes, but it's not so much about fighting against, it's about moving toward the deepest, truest, fullest expression of our humanness. The transhuman movement wants to steal that from us. When you replace your biology with computer chips in the brain, chemicals in the blood, nanosensors running through your circulatory system, RFID chips, what you're doing is you're giving your humanness away. You're giving away your divinity. And this is how evil triumphs. So we are living a time, and I'll just tell you, there's a shelf life to this battle. All of the ancient traditions and many of the modern institutions are looking at about 5 years from now, the year 2030. The year 2030 is when the United Nations wants to have certain policies in place. The only way to put those policies into place is you've got to change this world out there, and you've got to change the world in here in ways that we've never had the ability to do before, but now we have the technology. And what you see, the craziness that you're seeing in the world are the people, the individuals, the corporations, the power structures jockeying for position to be in the best possible place when this convergence point takes place. I'm not going to give an exact date, but it's around, they have targeted the year 2030. So that is I'm a scientist. I'm a degreed earth scientist, senior computer systems designer during the Cold War years. A very strong background in math, physics, computer science, cosmology, and archaeology. And I say that because it gives me the ability, multidisciplinary ability, to keep my fingers on the pulse. What's going on in the world? The craziness that we're seeing, it's not random and it's not spontaneous. You're seeing a concerted effort, the powers that be, for them to be in the best possible place, and for us to give away our power, our humanness, our divinity, to help them to be in that best possible place. It's a world of control and power. I'm hesitating because I don't know how far you want to go into this, but there's a man, Ray Kurzweil. I don't know if you're familiar with Ray Kurzweil. He is a futurist. He is an author. He is one of the lead scientists. He's a director of engineering at Google Technology right now with AI, artificial intelligence. And he just released a book this year. This is the end of the year 2024. It's almost the end of this year. Ray Kurzweil released a book earlier this year called The Singularity. And he is talking about what I'm talking about from a technological perspective. And what he is saying is by the year 2030-ish, when you talk to someone in the grocery store or you see them on the street, you will be talking to someone who is a hybrid of biology and some form of technology in their bodies. That very probably, unless the thinking changes, unless the trajectory shifts, we are the last generation of pure humans that this world will ever know. My new book is titled Pure Human, and I'm pushing back on everything that I'm saying right now with information that helps us to make healthy choices. But Ray Kurzweil is saying by 2030, that happens. By the year 2045, which isn't that far away, that's in our lifetimes, that we will have achieved what he calls the singularity. And the singularity is where we are digitally part of the internet of all things, a massive database where everything on the planet is digitized. Every giraffe in Africa, every elephant, the fish in the oceans, they have ways to digitally identify the fish in the oceans, all the trees in the forests, every human on the face of the earth, what we consume, what we eat, what we grow, what we buy, where we go, all part of this database controlled by one massive artificial intelligence, one massive AI. So his book is called The Singularity, very controversial. He's talking about that, the singularity. I am pushing back on the idea of giving our humanness away to technology, because there's something about us that is so rare and ancient and sacred and precious that I feel that we are worth preserving. We're not a perfect species, but we were given a gift, apparently that's given to no other form of life, at least that we're aware of. And I have to say it was given to us because the DNA studies show that we are not the product of natural biological evolution, slow change over a long period of time. 200,000 years ago, the scientists agree on that date, there were a series of mutations that make us who we are. They happen all at the same time. They cannot happen under natural conditions. They don't happen in nature. Chromosome 2, the fusion, is one of those. Chromosome 7 that gives us the ability for complex speech. I'm a musician when I'm not doing what I'm doing now. And as a musician, I've always been fascinated. Chimpanzees share 98% of our DNA, and you'll never hear a chimpanzee sing Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven. And I've always wondered, why is that? Because they're so close to us genetically. Chromosome 7 is the answer. There was a genetic tweak that connected our tongue and our brain and our jaw so that you and I can have this conversation. No other form of life has this. And it's intentional. Now, as a scientist, what I have to say, when I look at the data, that there has been some kind of intervention, I can't say scientifically who or what that is. But let me just say this quickly. There's and this is why science is having a hard time right now. There's a huge difference between taking new discoveries and forcing those discoveries to fit into pre-existing ideas, pre-existing theories, like the theory of evolution. So a huge difference between doing that and allowing those new discoveries to lead to the story that they tell. And scientists, the older scientists, are reluctant. There's a new generation. You all are part of it. I don't know what our age difference is, but I know that you're of a different generation than I am. And there's a new generation of scientists that say, hey, these old ideas don't fit. Let's follow the data to the story it leads. And so this is a really exciting time. And it's also a time where we're on this precipice. We're about to make a decision to give our humanness away, Alexis, before we even know what it is we're giving away, before we even know what it means to be human. And I'm advocating for our humanness. My hope is that these conversations and the new book, Pure Human, at the very least, will help us to cultivate a deeper appreciation for what it means to be human in a time when young people are told that we are flawed. We are a flawed, weak, vulnerable, powerless species. That we have a deeper appreciation and maybe even further, maybe even a sense of pride. I personally, knowing what I know and seeing what I've seen, I am proud to be a human. And the last thing, and then we can unpack this, the new science is showing us that much of the technology that we're being encouraged to accept into our bodies, that we already perform the functions in our bodies biologically, that the machines do technologically. In many cases, we meet and even exceed the capacity of the computer chips, of the AI, and of the chemicals. And once we begin to understand that about ourselves, I think we develop an even deeper appreciation for who we are. And the beauty is we don't have to know any of it to benefit from it. So we're having a conversation that people want to think differently about themselves. There's a lot of information to do that. But you don't have to know any of this, because the user interface for this amazing biology, this technology that we have, soft technology, thought, feeling, emotion, breath, focus, nutrition, and movement. And that's it. That is the user interface that allows us to develop our human divinity, our ability to transcend perceived limitations. So I talked a lot. I said a lot. I'm going to stop there and let's see where we want to go from here. And thank you for the opportunity to share those things, to kind of lay that out so we can tie into it.
That was absolutely incredible. And thank you so much. There's many things I want to touch upon regarding that. I want to talk about your new book. I also want to talk about the God Code. But before I forget, I wanted to go back a little bit to what you're talking about with the good and evil, because from what I've learned as well, the goal isn't necessarily utopia here. And can you touch upon how contrast could actually be helpful in our journeys as well? And what do you think the goal is here, essentially? Like, is this a jumping board to get us entry into another place, essentially? Or is this where we're supposed to create the utopia? What are your thoughts regarding that?
Okay, well, that's why I asked how deep. I didn't know how deep you want to go with the conversation. So let me just say this. You can't make this stuff up. And I'll say everyone learns differently. So there are some people that won't identify with the language that I'm using, but the principles, inviting people to look at the principles. If my words don't work, just forget about the words. Think about the principles that I'm sharing here. So one of the places, let's go back 1946, 1947, way back in the 20th century. There were discoveries that were made in the area that is known as Qumran in the Dead Sea. And the discovery was called the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I know many of your viewers are familiar. Some people maybe have never heard of these before. There were 11 caves that were discovered. And in those 11 caves were vases. They weren't like little pickle jars. They were 2 or 3 feet tall. And they were sealed with tar. And they had inside of them scrolls that pushed the date of the Old Testament back over 1,000 years earlier than what had been found before. Here's why that's important. The dates, these were the oldest records of the Old Testament that were unedited. And they were very different from the edited versions that we have access to today in the King James Version of the Bible or whatever. And they're from a non-religious perspective, purely a historic perspective. So I'm not saying that the Bible is bad. I'm saying in many cases it's incomplete when you compare it to the original scrolls. So you can't make this up. It was in the very first cave, the very first vase that was discovered, and the first scroll that was pulled out that gives the reason for why this battle is happening the way it's happening right now. And what's fascinating is that all those scrolls, although the scrolls were discovered in 1946-47, they were not allowed to be shared with the public until 1991. And the Vatican fought back against this. A lot of politicians, a lot of governments did not want this information shared. And you say, well, what could possibly be in a 2,500-year-old text that would warrant that kind of energy and time and money? And the answer was in that first scroll. So the first scroll that was found is actually called the War, W-A-R, it's called the War Scroll. And it describes an ancient battle that we're part of, but nobody's ever told us this. And it's a battle between, and these are the exact words, between what they call the sons of darkness and the sons of light. Now, I was with a live group recently, and there was a woman who was offended because the female gender was not part of that. 2,500 years ago, they weren't talking about gender the way that we do today. And when we say sons of darkness and sons of light, male and female is inclusive. It's talking about all of us. I want to honor our community and say that. The sons of darkness and sons of light, we know that battle is the battle between good and evil, is another way of saying it. And the goal of that battle is the answer to your question. The goal of the battle is to deny humans access to their divinity. When we no longer have our divinity, then we are vulnerable to the forces of evil, the forces of darkness. And that is the goal of the battle, to deny us those things. And this battle is ancient. It began before we got here. It's a cosmological battle that goes so deep and so far. And if people don't like the ideas of good and evil, and the ideas of angels and demons and things like that. This is the thing. Those old texts, they equate them to what today we would call aliens and ETs, which is very interesting because we're in the process now. Congressional testimony is trying to get to the bottom of what our relationship is with, our cosmological family. And under oath, now has been revealed that we have technology from other worlds. I don't think anybody's surprised by that, but that came out under oath. Under oath now it came out that we have the biological bodies that are not human, that some of those bodies are still alive. I don't think anybody's surprised by any of that. What it means is that we have technology available to us that could make our lives much better and end the suffering for many people of this world, forms of energy that don't require us to burn fossil fuels that would be available to everyone. And there are a lot of people pushing back on that. But it's all about language, because this battle has been going on so long. If the words angels and demons evoke a biblical sense, and that's offensive to some people, then you can replace that with aliens and ETs. And this is exactly, there are forces out there. When you read the descriptions in the ancient texts, the Sumerian text, the Mesopotamian text, the Egyptian text, that's exactly what they're talking about. And now the awareness of these forms of life are coming up in our world right now, and they're giving it new names, but it's a very, very old idea. So the point is that there's something within us, inside of every human, that is so cherished and rare and sacred and precious and powerful that there are forces, organizations, power structures that will go to any length to deny us that power. And it's our love, our forgiveness, our extraordinary ability to imagine and simulate ideas in our mind and to be able to communicate with those with other people. So in these next few years, we're going to be indoctrinated, we're going to be encouraged, slick, sexy marketing and media. It's going to make it look really attractive to give our humanness away to technology. And we're going to be told it will be safer. We're going to be told we'll be healthier. These are the the languages that will be used to entice us into these things. But now what we've done in this little bit of time we've had together, I want to empower. I love this world, and I love the people of this world, and I love my brothers and sisters. And I want everyone to have the power to make healthy choices for themselves. So when you hear all the slick marketing, you say to a young kid, I just had this happen in a live event. You say to a young kid, hey, all you need is a computer chip in your brain and you can play Grand Theft Auto with no keyboard and no wires. You can talk directly to your computer and he's going to say, sweet, bring it on. Because no one's ever told him that when you give your humanness away to the machines, that your biology begins to atrophy. You begin to lose abilities and capabilities that are being replaced by those machines. Nobody's told him that. Nobody's told him how rare and precious his body is. And this is a message. I think it's not always a popular message. I think it's necessary because our species is on the line and our humanness is on the line, and it's not going to drag on for years and years. The changes are happening so quickly. I mean, this stuff is coming down. The policies are already being written. The laws are already being enacted, for us to embrace these technologies and made to look really good. And, Alexis, it's a very personal choice for everyone. So I would never tell anyone, attempt to convince or persuade anyone. I just want people to know if you give your humanness away, you'll never get it back. And this is what it is that you're giving away. Are we willing to give our humanness away for the efficiency and the speed of AI and computer chips? And it actually comes down to, you don't have to know any of this. It comes down to a much more fundamental question. It's all about love. And the question is, do we love ourselves enough to accept the responsibility and the deep truth of what it means to be human? Do we love ourselves enough? And it's not the question you answer with words. It's through the choices and the actions every moment of every day in our lives. Every moment of every day, we either choose to affirm or deny life in our bodies through what we eat, what we say, how we speak to others, how we allow other people to speak to us, the choices of technology that we choose in the world, all of that. I'm not saying it's right, wrong, good, or bad. I just want people to be aware. Just be conscious of what those choices are and that we do have a choice. So does that make sense if I say it that way?
Absolutely. And what also came to mind too is we're not only getting, bombarded from a technological standpoint, but I also see it from a healthcare standpoint because the pills that they're giving us nowadays are changing our entire chemistry and our brains as well. So can you touch upon that?
Yeah, this is where the science gets really interesting. I'll just give you a couple of examples. Virtual reality has now been around long enough that psychologists are able to do studies on what it does to young people's brains, not just their mind, but their brain. So, for example, they did studies. There were families that had like 3-year-old kids. They'd have their Cheerios or Captain Crunch or whatever it is for breakfast, and then they'd sit them in the living room, put an AI visor to entertain them for 3 hours, 4 hours at a time while the parents are off doing what they need to do. They've got things to do. And what the psychologists found, they were able to I talk about this in the new book, and I give the references for this. What they found is that those young kids, they were stunted in many different ways in their growth. First, their physical bodies were stunted in size and growth. Their muscles were atrophied. They because they're not using their muscles. Their cognitive abilities were stunted. Their socialization skills were stunted because they weren't spending time with their friends. They were spending time with this AI visor. But here's the thing. In that AI visor, they were seeing scenes and hearing sounds and vivid colors that they would never see in the backyard playing with their friends. But here's the catch. Everything that they were seeing was happening. They were observing it happening rather than creating it happening. They weren't using their imagination. They were just watching. When I was a kid, I have a younger brother. We're 4 years, he's 4 years younger than I am. We used to use our imaginations a lot. In the living room, you'd take a blanket off the bed and you'd throw it over a couple of chairs, and now you got a tent. And then if you've got a really good imagination, that tent is an outpost on a faraway planet that you just landed on. And then you wear a raincoat that's your radiation suit to protect you from the radiation of this planet. And it's silly. We used to do this. But the point is, we're using our imagination. And those kids that are with the AI visors, they're not imagining anything. It's all done for them. They're just watching. So not only is their brain size smaller and all of these abilities stunted, but the researchers actually found a physical change in the brain. Their visual cortex in the brain was thickened. And that makes sense because you're using your visual skills to watch the AI. And so that part of your brain is going to be more active. So actually the visual cortex was thickened. The same thing happens from people that use repetitive use of plant medicine. Plant medicine can do wonderful things to break through PTSD, to break through deep trauma, and I've seen it work for a therapeutic dosage, for in a clinical setting, for a reason to heal something, but to use it chronically as a recreational escape. Weekend after weekend, year after year. The same thing they found is happening. The visual cortex of those people is thickening. That changes the way that you see the world. So if you're a shaman in Brazil and you live in the jungle, that's no big deal. If you're writing software for nuclear triggers in Silicon Valley during the week and you're doing ayahuasca recreationally, weekend after weekend, year after year, that's going to shift your perception of the way you could develop that software. So again, it's just something to be aware of. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but there are consequences to the choices. So the really good news, because we're humans, epigenetics can change all of that. Those young kids, when they begin to engage their bodies and engage their brains differently, then they can catch up with those cognitive disparities, I guess you'd call them, and the verbal skills and the body and all that. So it's all about how we engage with the world. Mm-hmm. And when we replace our biology with technology, our natural abilities begin to atrophy. So if you replace, like I said, computer chip in the brain, here's a study that was, I'll just say this. When I was in school, 50s, 60s, even early 70s, and what they're still teaching kids today is that when we're born, we have a finite number of brain cells. And I remember when I was in college, that was the reason, the leverage that we were given to stop drinking beer. They said, every beer you drink, you're going to kill those brain cells, and you've only got, a finite number to begin with. Well, now we know that's not true. That there's a part of our brains, the hippocampus, we are producing new brain cells until the last breath we take on this planet, which is really good news. But there's a catch, and the catch is this. Every time we produce those new cells, they must be engaged in a meaningful way within about 7 days. It's about a week after they emerge from the hippocampus, or they will atrophy and die. Mm-hmm. And the reason they atrophy and die is because the body says if you don't use them, you don't need it. All right? So that principle applies when we begin replacing our own biology, our immune system, our, the computer chips in the brain that are thinking or solving problems for us. We begin doing those things, the natural part of us that's done that in the past feels it's no longer needed, and it begins to atrophy. And in one generation, and then epigenetically, you pass that down to the next generation. Mm. And pretty soon, what used to be a viable skill becomes a vestige of our past because that's how you lose a species. It's exactly how you lose a species. And so these are some of the drawbacks of replacing our own natural biology with technology. And I want to be very clear, I'm not anti-tech at all. I worked in a high-tech world during the Cold War years. A project called SDI, Star Wars Defense Initiative. Some of the most amazing technology in the world, advanced lasers, communication systems. To this day, I've never seen any machines built outside of us that don't mimic what we already do in our bodies. The internet mimics the way that we connect energetically with one another. Blockchain technology, the new technology of decentralized finance, Bitcoin, that's our future, actually mimics the way information is stored in the DNA of every cell in our bodies. It's transparent. It's not hidden if you know how to read it. It's immutable because it's distributed. It is secure, can't be hacked. And so it's a beautiful example. Blockchain technology mimics what we already do in the cells of our bodies. So I think once we begin to see ourselves a little differently, maybe we feel less urgency to adopt that technology into our bodies. And once we begin to recognize and I'm not saying everyone who encourages technology knows everything we're talking about. There are levels. There is a battle between good and evil driving all of this. And then as you filter down through the layers, there are human tendencies that succumb to either good or evil. Someone who's naturally greedy is going to gravitate toward the kinds of technologies and the policies that encourage that greed. Someone who is benevolent in the way they think and supportive of our humanness will gravitate toward other things. So not everyone, is fully aware of everything we're talking about, although there are pawns. There are pawns in the process. But the technology can be a beautiful thing, Alexis and Ali, and I just want to be really clear. It's not about anti-tech. It's the thinking underlying how it's used. Men and women who have gone to the battlefield in Afghanistan and have come home, they gave their lives for this big, beautiful country we live in that I love so much. They gave their lives, and maybe they came home missing arms and legs. And all of a sudden now, because of advanced technology and prosthetics and a computer chip in the brain, they can now hold their own babies in their arms, and they can brush their own teeth and feed themselves and comb their hair. I mean, what a beautiful, beautiful thing for those individuals. But to implement that technology en masse, to mandate that everyone get a computer chip in the brain that doesn't need one, that's a whole different story. And this is what we're looking at right now. So I just want to make that distinction. Does that make sense if I say it that way?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it does. And I'm curious, in your book, Pure Human, obviously there's preserving our humanity, as you said, and not choosing to integrate tech into our bodies. But are there practices or things that anyone listening can do to,
Absolutely. Well, the book, the first part of the book, because I know we're not going to have time to get to all this, I'm identifying early on in the book what this context that we're having right now. You mentioned the book, The God Code. I go into depth in this book in chapter 2 for those that want to walk with me to derive the message encoded into the DNA of every human that's ever walked this earth. There is an intelligent message encoded into our genome. I wrote an entire book about it in 2004.
I'm reading it
which
halfway through.
I guess that's 20 years ago now.
Yeah.
That's a mind blower. And 2004. And I take the reader through that if they want to. If they don't, there's a place in the book I say, if you don't want this detail, skip ahead to this point, and then you can go get the benefit, but you don't have to go through deriving the information. So I talk about all of that. We describe the transhuman movement and ask the question, whose idea of progress is it that we're following? I mean, here's a handful of people in the World Economic Forum and then the United Nations. And I have to say, the UN is not the UN that I grew up with. The UN has changed. It's been hijacked. And there are good people working in the UN, and I have friends working in the UN. There are UNs within the UN, and not all of them agree. I mean, they're doing this as well. But the point is, those people, World Economic Forum, the United Nations, we didn't elect them, and it's their ideas of what they think the world should look like in your life and my life, in your body and my body. It's their ideas that are now being made into policy and even law in some cases. And that's concerning relationship. I think we need to take a hard look at that. So I identify those things. I have a chapter on everyday divinity, how people live divinity in their lives. I mean, beautiful example of the divinity is the healing of a cancerous tumor inside the body of a living woman in 2 minutes and 40 seconds. I've shared the video. You can see it online. Everybody's bootlegged it. They've hijacked it. They've put all kinds of different stories to it. But if you go to my official YouTube channel, Gregg Braden Official, I've got the actual video and the narrative. But the point is that we're wired, we're made to heal if we can embrace the technology of our bodies. This is where the thinking changed within the last 5 years. We have been taught to think of the human body as this error-prone, soft, wet, sticky, gooey, mushy stuff, in the cells. And we write about it in biology books, and it is what it is. That's cool. But now, about 5 years ago, scientists began looking at the human body from an IT perspective, information technology, realizing that every cell in our body is an electrical circuit, but it's not made of chips and wires. It's made of cell membranes. That's a way different way of thinking. And that every cell in our bodies is a gated circuit. It's got an input and output, resistors, transistors, capacitors, that we absorb photons of light. And light is information. And we emit photons of light. So we're speaking to the world through light. We are photon emitters. That every cell in the body stores and retrieves information just like you do on a chip. The DNA stores information like blockchain technology. And that is an expression of what is called a soft technology. We are a highly advanced, technologically sophisticated, soft technology. And our user interface is very simple. Thought, feeling, emotion, breath, movement, and focus. Our most ancient and cherished spiritual traditions tell us all about that. And that's the beauty of being such a complex system, is the user interface is simple. You don't have to know anything that we've said today. And you can embrace new ways of thinking, feeling, emoting, different kinds of nutrition, movement, and you can benefit from all of that. That's human divinity that allows us to do that. No other form of life can do what we do at will, on demand, when we choose to do it. No other form of life can do that. So I also have a chapter in the book, chapter 7. It's a very powerful chapter, and we went round and round with the editors on this one. The title is called Breaking the God Spell of Technology, because we are all casualties through social media and what are called media silos, the algorithms that keep feeding us information that lead us to think in a certain way to support certain agendas, politically, economically, socially, healthcare, all of those things. And I'm identifying what those techniques are so that we can recognize when we're being indoctrinated. It's almost like it is a form of deprogramming, just like you would from a cult. When someone's been in a cult, C-U-L-T, not O-C-C-U-L-T. When someone's been in a cult and their family has rescued them or whatever, this happened a lot back in the 70s and 80s. Heard a lot about this. They would go through a process of normalization where they would be led to see how they were indoctrinated. And in a very real sense, that applies to every one of us. Because unless we're under a rock, we're all getting our information through some kind of news, either mainstream media or YouTube, Twitter feeds, TikTok, whatever it is. And there are algorithms that are tailoring that information to lead us to come to certain conclusions that support certain ideas and policies. We're all part of it. Even knowing it, I'm part of it. But once you see the techniques, and I've identified 3 very powerful ones, so that we can recognize and the remedy to those techniques, I identify those as well. In the book, I also identify practices. Heart-brain coherence is a very powerful technique that I learned from the Institute of Heart Math. I'm not their employee. I've worked with them since their inception in 1994. 95 is when they began, and we become good friends. We tour together, we fundraise together, and they've given me permission as an independent author to share a lot of their research and their techniques. The ability to harmonize the neural network in the heart and the brain into a single, 2 organs, one very potent system, and then apply that to our healing or our intuition, super memory, super learning, super cognition, super resilience, all those things. So yes, is the short answer to the long question. Or I guess I just gave you a long answer to your short question. And yes is my short answer.
I feel like what you're saying is so important because I was raised not all on social media, but it's kind of where I got my start. And it was quite shocking of how quickly it connected us. And obviously not so much anymore. It's independent media. There are independent media channels, but Instagram specifically felt very pure at first. And now it feels like what you're saying, this algorithmic chamber kind of condemning you to these like past thoughts that you've had and you can't outrun
Absolutely.
them.
I'm going to give you a real life example. And this is one it's not easy to talk about in this country, but you said we can go deep, and you can edit it if you don't want me to say it. October 7th, the Nova Music Festival in Israel. I was in London the day that happened, and I was in my hotel room preparing to go down to the conference to deliver a keynote presentation. And I don't even have a TV at home. When I'm on the road in a hotel, I have it on sometimes just to see, what's going on in the world. And all of a sudden, the news feeds, the raw news feeds from Asia, from the Middle East, and Eastern Europe began to come in, and I could see exactly what was happening in that Nova Music Festival. And most of the audience didn't know. I had to go do my presentation knowing what was happening and knowing that most people had no idea. I got back to my hotel later that day, and because of the time difference, America was asleep because of the time difference. So when I got back to the hotel, I clicked on CNN, and to this day, I'll just say to you both, America has not been allowed to see the truth of what happened at the Nova Music Festival. And there are different reasons for that. Some of the social media have community guidelines that will not allow that. So they've been deprived of seeing that. Some of the media networks, mainstream media, had narratives that they wanted to push, and those narratives were not supported if they had shown what actually happened. But here's the consequence. Because we were not allowed in this country to see the truth of what happened, many people deny that those horrors, pure unadulterated evil, they deny that it ever happened. And that has caused a division, a rift. And you saw it playing out on college campuses. You see it playing out in the workplace. I see it among my friends. I see it at my friends who have kids. I have no children of my own. I've never been blessed with any kids. But at the family dinner table, so the media silos that determined how much information was shared and how much was not allowed actually caused a social division that to this day has still broken families and friends, certainly members of our community. And that is a perfect real-time example of the power that these algorithms have. The young people, and I've talked to them, they said, hey, that stuff never happened. If it had, we would have seen the pictures. They lied to us. It's all fake news. It was AI, fake news. It never happened. When the sad part is our brothers and sisters suffered tremendously and continue in what happened in that in ways that we don't get to support them because we're not even told that it happened.
Yeah.
So it's just an example of a relevant example of how that media, how it massages our perceptions and how it leads us to conclusions that would change if we had all the information. Did I say that okay for you guys?
Yes.
Does that make sense?
No, perfect. And it feels like there's this frenzy because I do believe in, from what I've seen, we are, getting out of their control, and we do have independent media now, and they are stifling it as much as they possibly can, but we are getting our way out of it. Where do you see that going? Because I know that there is a war over our freedom of speech now that's very apparent.
What I see happening, first of all, I'm going to reiterate, I am very optimistic. There was a time in our past, we humans are good people. A lot of people don't believe that, but the psychology and the anthropologists will tell us humans are actually a benevolent species. Now, it's hard to believe that when you see what you see, but we are a kind, generous, and benevolent species. And perfect example. I mean, there was a story that came out of Afghanistan. There were 4 men in a tank, 3 of them underneath, and the guy up on top looking out. One of the enemy took a hand grenade and threw it into that tank. The guy on top could have jumped off to save his life without even thinking. So this is instinctive. He dropped down into the tank and covered that grenade with his body to shield so his brothers and sisters could live. He absorbed that blast with his body and didn't give it a second thought. That is instinctive. It means there's a part of us that just does that. We don't even think about the consequences. He left a wife and kids behind, but there's something in him. We are a good and benevolent species, but here's the thing. Our psychologists tell us that we will betray our truest nature, and we will become violent, and we will lash out under one of 3 conditions. When we feel personally threatened, when we feel that our family is threatened, or when we feel that our way of life is threatened. And you look at all of the violence anywhere in the world, and most times all 3 of those are present. People don't feel safe, they don't think their families are safe, and their way of life is being taken away from them. So that is part, and I think it's intentional, breaking those social bonds for the reasons that we're talking about. So where I see it going, and the reason I'm optimistic, I think what's happening, I would like to be able to say, hey, the whole world is waking up, but I don't see that. What I do see is I think 2 parallel societies are emerging, and we're seeing it happen right now. So there's a lot of hurt in the world right now that is not resolved. And when hurt is not resolved, it turns into fear. And the fear is expressed as hate. So the hate you see outwardly in the world is telling us our brothers and sisters are hurt, and they don't know what to do with that hurt in the world, okay? So we're seeing a lot of that in the world right now. 2 parallel societies are emerging in response to that. There's one element of our society that is so deeply hurt that they live in fear. And in that fear, they will say yes to everything incoming. They're going to say yes to all the new policies. They're going to say yes to the technology in their bodies. They're going to say yes to anything that makes life easier and makes them feel safer because they're hurt and they're in fear. You're seeing that happen right now. There's another segment of our society. Now, I mentioned I live in a rural area in northern New Mexico, just outside of Santa Fe. And when I go to my local co-op, my food co-op is where I see my neighbors. They're not having this conversation. And most of them don't have time. They're really good people that are working really, really hard to keep their homes together because everything's so expensive, and to keep their families together. But here's what they say to me. They say, Greg, something's not right. The world, something is not right in the world. It's moving too fast. We need to slow down and get back to basics. And so what they're doing is they're pulling their kids out of public schools to homeschool them so they can share not just the values, but the skills and the techniques that are going to help those kids be viable members in society. They're not learning that in school. They're growing their own food and they're drilling their own wells. They don't trust the water. They don't trust the food. And this is their response. They're rejecting the technology, and the other side is embracing the technology. That's unsustainable. You can't do that forever. And I think what will happen is we'll do what humans do. We're going to check each other out because we like to people watch. And we're going to say, whose life is happier, whose life is healthier, whose kids are healthier, whose lives are more fulfilled. And the answer to that question, I think, will determine where those parallel societies merge. And I think what will happen is we'll find a middle ground. I don't think we'll reject technology. I think we will learn to allow the technology to serve us rather than becoming enslaved by the technology. If that technology replaces our natural biology, we are enslaved by the technology. But if we can allow it to serve us, and I think it'll happen, it's not sustainable the way it is now. Something's got to give.
Yeah.
And I think you'll see this happen. It's already happening to some degree. I think you'll see it happen pretty quickly. But a lot of people, the UN, for example, is complaining. They want these 17 sustainable, quote, sustainable, unquote, goals. They want them implemented by the year 2030. They are so far behind, and they don't understand why. The reason is because they're bad ideas, and people don't want them. People don't want them. The UN wants them. The World Economic Forum wants them. And there are some corporations and banks that want them. But they're bad ideas in the way they're being implemented. And I want to be really clear. When you look at those goals, they're beautiful goals on the outside. For example, who wouldn't want one of them is food security? Who doesn't want food security? I do. One of them is eradication of poverty. I'd love to see eradication of poverty. Who doesn't want the end to childhood disease? Okay, so beautiful goals. Now, you look down at the fine print. How are they going to achieve those? It's horrendous. The only way to achieve them is to remake the world and remake our bodies, and that's what I'm pushing back on. So where I'm an optimist because I see these parallel societies emerging. That's the way we work. And I'm seeing people that don't have all the information that we have right now. They're not having this conversation. They just know they don't like where the world is going. And so they're spontaneously, and almost everywhere I go, not just in America, everywhere in the world, people are looking for their tribe. They're looking for their community. Some people want to relocate geographically to places that are more in line with their values and their belief systems. People are questioning their careers. They're questioning what they do with their life energy every day and how they can better use their life energy. It's all up for grabs right now because everyone feels this shift. That's when good stuff happens. When everything is questioned, that is where the doors for new opportunities open up. If everything was all buttoned up, nice and neat, it's really hard to get a new idea across. But right now, one person can come up with an idea and the world can embrace it and become a better world for it. And that's why I want to say to any young people watching this, have babies, make babies. I know people that say they don't want kids. They say, I would never bring a child into the world the way it is today. And my response to that is, why would you deny a soul the opportunity to come in at this rare, precious window of time when one human life can have the idea that changes this world, makes it the most beautiful place you can imagine, when the opportunity is there for one life to make a difference that we didn't see maybe 50 years ago. So just saying.
No, it's true. I have that conversation all the time with my friends, and I have been more from that fear base of I don't know what I'm leaving them with, and that does scare me. But at the same time, you are very correct, and that makes me happy as well.
Well, we are wired. We are biologically and psychologically wired for this kind of change. The key is that we must embrace our divinity, which is what enables us to successfully navigate this kind of change. If we deny our divinity, the world looks really scary. If you deny, remember the definition, the ability to transcend perceived limitations. If you deny that you have that ability, it's a scary world out there. And that is where we fall into the trap of the fear that makes us vulnerable to the ideas of others. And that's where the suffering comes from. We weren't meant to suffer the way that we have in the past. And, there's a new world emerging. We all know that. I don't know everyone, obviously, that's going to watch this. But what I do know is I would imagine that everyone that's going to watch this, when we move into that new world, because I'm moving in there with you, I'm on the 200-year plan on this planet. I told my mom that when I was 5 years old, and I'm doing my best to live to it. All right. So I want this new world. I want to see all the good stuff that happens from all the work that we've done all these years. What I know is this about the people right now. We don't want that new world to be based on the hurt of our past and the suffering that the last few generations have gone through in the 20th century, and the cruelty and the atrocities. We want all of that to be a thing of the past. And the only way to do that is we embrace our divinity and move forward from this place with the deep truth of what it means to be human. And that all comes down to the question that we asked earlier. Do we love ourselves enough? I'm just going to make it personal. I'm going to invite each individual to ask, do I love myself enough to embrace the truth and the responsibility of what it means to be human? And think about that as you go through your day and recognize that it's not an answer with your voice. You're answering it with every choice. Every choice. What we eat, how we speak to another person, kindness. Those are all facets of our divinity. So let's love this new world into existence. That's what I'm saying. And that's why I'm excited. That's why I'm excited to share the new book. I'm excited for these conversations, and that's why I appreciate you two so much.
You got me teary-eyed.
The hub of the hub of the community that you've created.
Yeah.
Because it's through communities like this that we can connect and have these conversations. So thank you for your trust in me.
Thank you so much. It has been such a gift to speak to you. It's been a dream come true, and you have the ability to give really intense facts, but coming from such a heart-centered place. And I think having that as an example is such an incredible way to become a mentor or a teacher. And so just thank you for being a guiding light in that way as well, of not just giving this information and being such a hub for wisdom, but also transmuting it in a way that gives us hope no matter what you say. So it's really special.
Well, let me ask this. We've been together. You and I have never met. We just shared a little over an hour of our lives together today. You and Allie and myself. So in the hour we've been together, do you have any sense, deeper appreciation for your humanness, and maybe even a little bit of pride? Are you proud? Proud to be a human on this earth?
Very proud. You're human.
You don't have to
I'm
say
proud.
yes just because you're on the
human,
Alexis
I'm proud.
podcast. See, and this is the point. It's got to be fun. It's
Yeah.
okay to have fun. It's okay to laugh, because every time we laugh, we open our hearts to new possibilities, and it's good. It's good to laugh, and it's good. I'm a musician when I'm not doing this, and I got to tell you, music makes the world go around. Music, movement, dance, and this could be some pretty heavy stuff if we didn't allow for the beauty of sound, of music, of art, personal relationships, the beauty of love and intimacy, all of those things. It could be pretty heavy if we didn't allow for that in our lives. So I think it's an invitation just for us all to be the best version of ourselves, knowing that when we do that, we're living our divinity. And by living our divinity, we are triumphing in the ancient battle, but we don't even have to know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This makes me want to go to a ballet class or surf, or you should go right after this. She's a poet, and she's an incredible poet. Yeah.
You're so sweet.
Yeah.
Do you put your poetry to music?
She has actually.
That's actually an intention I have this next year because I love instrumentals and scores, and like the violin and the piano make me cry. I'm actually curious, as a musician, what's your favorite instrument?
I don't know if you, I used to, the last musical tour I did, there was a recording label called Windham Hill. I don't know if you guys remember Windham Hill label, and it was all instrumental. Michael DeGrassi, or it was Alex DeGrassi, Michael Hedges, George Winston. There's a woman named Liz Story, who was the pianist. I toured with Liz in 1998, and another man, James Twyman. We toured. I did flute. I'm a guitarist. Have been since I was 8 years old. Cool. 6-string, 12-string, acoustic, electric. Got a beautiful not new, but it's a Fender Stratocaster that's a Jimi Hendrix signature on the back of it. He was left-handed, so it's a reverse headstock, but it's still a right-handed guitar.
Wow.
And when I'm not doing this, I like to go plug that in. I've got a beautiful Marshall stack that I stand right in front of. And, that's Divinity as well. I had the opportunity a few years ago to attend the Grammys it was the year they were in New York, and I think it was 16 or 17 when they were usually they're in LA, but they were in New York that year. And every musician that I asked, I had the opportunity, I said, where did that amazing music come from? Or where did those amazing lyrics come from? And every one of them, they all gave me the same answer. They said, it didn't come from me. It came through me. And that is an expression of divinity. Our divinity is the part of us that's ancient, it's timeless, all-knowing. We get our ego out of the way, and that divinity flows right through. And so if you are putting music to your poetry, you are now a singer-songwriter. So that's what you are. And I love acoustic. I love electric. And I just think it's a really, music is such a powerful expression. My dream. Do I have time? Can I share my dream with you?
You have as much time as you want. Talk for the rest of our lives, Gregg.
My dream, if I was president of the world,
yay!
My dream would to have every world leader come into a room and leave their armies outside the door and leave all their technology outside the door and all their bodyguards outside the door and just come in a room and look at one another as men and women, eye to eye, heart to heart, mind to mind, human to human. And through music, I think we could build a really, really beautiful world. And if someone asked the question, President of Russia, President of China, President of America, how much good can we bring to this world in the time that we have left on this planet? How much good can we do together? How much beauty can we create between us? Man, what a different world. And I think music would be a powerful catalyst to allow that conversation if I were president of the world.
Honestly, you should be.
Yeah.
I have a random question. It's a quick answer one. If you were a song, what song would you be?
What song would I be?
Yeah, the song of your life.
I would be, I'll tell you.
He knows.
There's a group called 10 Years After. And I saw them in concert in 1967. The song is I'd Love to Change the World.
Oh.
That's the song that just popped into my mind.
That's
Except I would make a little distinction because in the song, this was from the 60s. And the song says, I'd love to change the world, but I don't know what to do, so I'll leave it up to you. In the song, I would say I'd love to change the world, and I would take the initiative to do that. I don't know what words it would be, but I wouldn't leave it up to everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
I think every one of us we're all leaders. Every one of us is a leader. And we have to have the confidence in ourselves to step up and lead in our family, in our community, in our society. But it begins within ourselves. We have to love ourselves enough and trust ourselves enough to know that we have something to share, and we all have something beautiful to share in this world. So if I want to see your poetry, where do I go to see that?
Oh, it's on the internet, on Instagram.
It's on the internet. I'll send it to your office.
I want to hear your music, though.
It's interesting. Our publishers publishers typically don't like their authors to be musicians. So they kind of put that on the back burner. But I'm working on a new CD, right? This is an exclusive. I haven't said to anybody else. I'm working on a CD right now. So it'll probably come out as an EP first. Doing it all in our own home studio here.
I bet it's so healing.
We will be one of your first listeners.
Yeah.
Well, I have to tell you, it may not be what you think. It's not like light, easy. I call it heavy industrial underground folk.
That
I
sounds
love
like my
that.
dream. I'll go to the
So
underworld.
you can kind of put that together. Some very soulful lyrics, but some really powerful power chords, guitar power chords under there, and some heavy percussion.
We need that, honestly. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I need that. So, yeah.
Therefore, we
So
need
Alexis, we've never worked together. Are you okay with everything we did together today?
That was absolutely perfect. That was such a pinch me moment. I've been waiting for this interview for 1.5 years. So thank you so much for giving all of the correct information. I feel like our listeners really, it's a lot of information, but the way, once again, that you package it helps you understand that it's just going back to that heart-based centered of way of living.
Well, thank you. We'll call this Alexis, Ali, and Gregg Big Fun Podcast Part 1.
Yes, part one. I was really hoping to get a part 1, but I wasn't putting any pressure. I was like, this has to be part 1. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. And yeah, we will see you guys next time.
next time.
Thank you so much, Greg.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all. Take good care. Bye-bye.